Now before we go any further, I recommend that we save our workbook. You can see up here on the title bar we got this generic name, Book 1. So as soon as we save it, it's going to ask us two questions if this is the first time we're saving it. Where do you want to save it, and what name do you want to give it? And right now it's not going to be Book 1, I can tell you that much. But let's go ahead and come over here and click on the File tab, go backstage, go down to Save As, and then you can save it to the OneDrive, which we haven't talked about, or to your computer here, your PC. It's selected there by default. Then over to the right, you got some folders on your computer that you can save it to, like the desktop or My Documents, or you can go ahead and click Browse, find a place somewhere on your computer through the Save As window, or better yet, let me click Cancel and click back. I've added the command to the Quick Access toolbar, the Save As, so I can click on that and I don't have to go backstage and go through all those clicks to save it to my computer. Automatically opens up the Save As window. So in the Save As window, I can navigate over here in the navigation pane to like my desktop, and on my desktop I want to save it to my exercises folder. Double click on that to open it up. So where do you want to save it, and what name do you want to give it? The name I want to give it is My Spiffy Ledger, because everything we do here is spiffy. And then go ahead and click Save, and there we go. Up in the title bar you can see it's not Book 1, it's My Spiffy Ledger. So we were able to save it where? Into the exercises folder on the desktop, and what name? So we can identify this workbook. It's right there, My Spiffy Ledger. Now after you save it for the first time, it does a Save As, because you need to give it a name and a place to be saved so it knows where to go every time thereafter you make a change to the workbook. Like I change it from 5 to 4, hit enter. Then I can just come up here and instead of doing Save As, just click Save, because it knows where to go, and where it goes is in the exercises folder on the desktop, and if there are other things in there, it says it's looking at the name of it, which is My Spiffy Ledger, the Excel file. So I can go ahead and go back to 5 and then click Save. It's not going to ask me those questions again. It's only the first time that you perform a save, it brings up the Save As. Now if you want to make a backup of your Excel workbook here, and when I talk about an Excel workbook, that's any Excel file that you save that has a worksheet in it. And guess what? You can't save an Excel file unless at least it has one worksheet in it. So it doesn't matter if you have 1, 2, 3 or more worksheets within a workbook. It's all referred to that file or this file or any file that you save as a workbook. So if I want to go ahead and make a backup of this because I want to make changes to this and I want to make sure that I have my original as the backup in case if I make mistakes and I go too far here that I can't undo my mistakes, because once I save it and I close out of it, then I open it back up and I'm like, oh, I need to undo that. I can't remember what the previous numbers were. Because I closed out of the session and I reopened the workbook back up, I don't get the undo. It's only for that current session that you're working in. So to go ahead and save a copy of this, you want to do a Save As. Remember, it's going to ask us two questions. What name do you want to give it, and where do you want to save it? So by following that same route again, we can choose a different name and save it in the same place. So we have two different workbooks with the same data, well currently as the same data, but different names. One will be my original, the other one will be the copy. So to do a Save As, again I added it up here to the Quick Access toolbar. There's the command Save As, click on it. Opens up the Save As window. Where do you want to save it? Well, it defaults to my exercises folder on the desktop, and you can see the address here, desktop, the exercises folder. And so down here for the name, so I don't keep it as the same name, because if it is, and I click Save, it says, do you want to replace what you have in here with the same name that you have here? Well, if you want to do an overwrite, that's fine, but we'll say no. And instead, let me click at the end here, we'll just call it copy. So that way we can say, okay, that's my original and this is my copy. Click Save. And then notice back up here on the title bar, I'm now in the copy. It automatically closed me out of the original My Spiffy Ledger, and now I'm in the copy. So any changes I make here is for the copy. So let's go ahead and close out of Excel. And speaking of which, of closing out of Excel, you can close out of the entire program, including the workbook that's currently in the program that you're working on, or you can just close out of the workbook. So to close out of just the workbook and leave the Excel program open, you can do it one of a couple of ways. You can either come up here, click on the File tab, and go down to Close, and notice the workbook is gone, but the shell of the program is still there. So I can go ahead with it open up the other workbook, and I can do that by coming up here on the Home tab, clicking on the Open folder, if you added that command to your Quick Access toolbar. So it opens the Open window. So I can look inside the Exercises folder on my desktop, and hey, there's my copy and there's my original. And then of course you can go ahead and open up the original with a double click. And then the other way to close out of this, if you don't want to do File to close, you can also do the shortcut keys Control W, and it closes out of the workbook that you're in, but leaves the program open. And then of course if you want to close out of the program, well then go ahead in the upper right hand corner, click on that X, and it closes the program, and also if you had any worksheets or workbooks opened, it'll close out of that as well, because when you close the program, you can't work on your workbooks. And then I go to my exercises folder on the desktop, double click to open up the folder. There they are. Or, let me close out of that. If you added the shortcut to the program down to your taskbar, you can right click on it and it opens up a jump list of the most recent workbooks that you worked on. And there you go, you've got a couple of them. And it just shows the most recent, so if you have like 300 different workbooks that you worked on throughout the day, it's only going to show like top 5 or top 10, however you want to customize this. Of course, you can watch the Windows training video on that. But if you want it to stay up there so it doesn't roll off because it's not one of the recent ones, but you always want it to be there, whether it's not the most recent workbook that you worked on, you get this little push pin. So if you always want My Spiffy Ledger there and not rolled off if there's other workbooks that you're working on, because that's not the most recent, then go ahead and select it, and it pins it and it pushes it up above this line, recent, and everything below is going to be recent. And if you want to get rid of it, so that way if you haven't worked on it for a while, you unpin it, it's going to roll off. You won't see it down below in the recent. But because it's recent, as we just saw, we were working on it, it's going to be there. So I can go ahead in that jump list, click on what's recent, opens it up, or if you don't want to use the jump list, you can come back here, click on the File tab to go backstage, and then go down to Open. And of course, you can go ahead and browse on your computer to find it, or over here on the right hand side, you get a list of what's recent today and those that I worked that are way old, way back in March here. And then you also get the option over to the right, as I discussed in an earlier training video, the little push pin. So not only in the jump list down below with a right click, but you can also come up here and say when I go to Open, let me go ahead and include Import Contacts, because as I start working on more workbooks, different workbooks than what I have here, this is going to roll off eventually and I won't see it. But if I want to work on this later on, then I can go ahead and select the push pin, and it puts it right up at the top, and it says everything in this section has been pinned. And you can see the pin is down as opposed to pointing to the left. So that will always stay there no matter how many different workbooks I work on. Everything else gets rolled off if it's not the most recent one. Otherwise, if I don't want it to be pinned anymore, so it does roll off if I haven't used it recently, then click on the pin to unpin it, and notice how it's not in today because I haven't worked on it today, and it goes back down below. In fact, if it's old enough, it'll go back down below or completely roll off if it's been really old.